Since Mrs. Russo, her husband and their 10 children immigrated from central Italy, Mrs. Russo has devoted her life to helping others. On Saturday night, she will be awarded the New South Wales Government Award for Community Service for the countless hours she's given to the Italian community. Mrs. Russo does not speak English fluently, but speaking through her son Nino, she expressed happiness at receiving the award. Mrs. Russo is modest about her achievements, but according to her family, she was instrumental in establishing the Italian Centre in Hamilton and helping to get the Highfields Azzurri Soccer Club up and running. She is well known in the Hamilton community and is always there when anything needs doing, and she has no intention of stopping.
This is 2 kilos of fat. If you're 4 kilos overweight, you're carrying twice this much around with you. And let me tell you, it's heavy. But the university is looking for female volunteers who need to lose at least 10 to 15 kilos for a study into why some diets work and others don't. One of the volunteers knows the problems even after a diet plan has been successful.
They give you a set period, you're going to have your weight off in 4 months or 6 months or whatever. But once you've got it off, that's it. They say bye, over and done with, it's out. But then you go home and slowly you have a party and something else will happen and you just put it all back on again.
According to Yvonne Webb, participants in the study won't be put on what's typically called a diet.
We don't call it dieting, so we're not putting people on a diet. We're teaching them sensible eating habits. We also don't want them doing anything that they're not prepared to do for the rest of their life. So they're going to have no special products and no calorie counting, no weighing of the food.
The phones at the Nutrition and Dietetics Department have been running hot with people keen to be a part of the study.
Preferably the people who've had difficulty losing weight before. Those who've tried and seem to be getting nowhere.
And if all goes to plan, the study's guinea pigs will have lost at least 10 kilos at the end of 15 weeks. Alison Peters, NBN News.
Mr Cook gave a brief press conference this afternoon where he said he'd be taking his style of management to a wider part of the New South Wales Police Force. As Assistant Commissioner, he will command an area from Sydney to the Queensland border, which includes 131 police stations and 3,000 police officers. Mr Cook was Newcastle's Chief Superintendent for 3 years, and he says his ties with the city will remain firm.
Well, I've made a lot of good friends in the Newcastle district. I would, because of this job, move away from that city, but I'd only be as far away as Hornsby. And because of my association with Newcastle, you could be rest assured I'd be backwards and forwards there.
Mr Cook joined the police force in 1951 as a cadet. He replaces Assistant Commissioner Charlie Parsons, who retired earlier this year. It's believed there were 6 candidates for the Assistant Commissioner's post.
Police say the 54-year-old victim who was travelling north on the highway lost control on the slippery road, veering into the path of an oncoming car. The 37-year-old driver of the other car was flown to the John Hunter, suffering fractures and lacerations. Traffic was delayed for a short time when the rescue helicopter landed on the highway. Traffic problems also on Charlestown Road at Charlestown today after a Pantech rental truck overturned, blocking the road for about half an hour. Police say the female driver braked suddenly, causing the truck to topple and slide along the roadway after an unidentified vehicle veered in front of her. Northbound traffic was banked up to the highway as rescue workers righted the truck. The driver was uninjured. The celebrations have special significance for the parish of West Maitland. 100 years ago, the local priest, Father Albert McLaren, left the area to establish the Anglican Church in Papua New Guinea. Around 300 people from Sydney and the Central Coast, including the head of the church in Australia, the Most Reverend Keith Rayner, arrived by train to join locals in a special service commemorating the event. Services like this are being held throughout Australia to raise money to help keep Christianity alive in Papua New Guinea.
The church in Papua New Guinea is now an autonomous church within the Anglican Communion, but they still lack resources of finance and also of specialists for certain positions. Most of their clergy now are Indigenous Papua New Guineans, but we need to give support for things that they can't provide from their own resources.
Flying one of these is no mean feat, even meaner when you consider combat flying skills are easily eroded by time. That makes training exercises essential.
Air combat skills particularly are very perishable, and that's part of the exercise, but most fighter flying can be classed as quite perishable skills. That is, if you don't practice them, you rapidly lose your skills and you have to then retrain all over again.
150 pilots from Australia and New Zealand are taking part in the exercise, flying A4 Skyhawks, F-111s and state-of-the-art Hornets. For Williamtown's 3 Squadron, it's a chance to prepare for an even bigger international exercise over Northern Australia in August. For New Zealand's 2 Squadron, now based in Nowra on the state's south coast, it's an opportunity to hone pilots' skills.
Most of our work is with the Navy, but when an opportunity arises, we can also exercise with the Army or the Air Force. Last week we were here and we were doing straight air combat with the F-18s. This week we've got a scenario of a war going on, and you've got aircraft striking targets and you've got aircraft defending targets.
And the Air Force maintains those targets and mock combat areas will be far from farms and towns below.
We actively avoid all the we call them noise-sensitive areas, and as you're aware, there are quite a few in the Upper Hunter with the mines, and particularly with the horse studs. So we have large areas where we do not fly low level over.
Police say the man drove through the intersection of George Downs Drive and the Pacific Highway and into the rock face at about 10:30. A 23-year-old woman from Manly in Sydney died instantly. 2 other passengers, also from Sydney, were critically injured. All were New Zealand citizens. The Accident Investigation Squad says speed and alcohol contributed to the crash and will continue questioning the driver tomorrow. Meantime, a campaign to find missing people has been extended nationwide. Successfully tested in Sydney last year, Operation Taxi uses photographs on the back of cabs. They feature some of the 24,000 people who disappear each year. Although most turn up within a few days, the campaign will focus on the ones who don't. Organisers hope they'll eventually have a national database to help them piece together information from across the country.
The HMAS Tobruk, the hard-won prize of a tendering war for a full refit, remains strike-bound in the dock. 4JAC's management and union officials went to the conciliation table today to no avail. Management is sticking to its guns on a plan to do away with the time-honoured roster system, and the union says it will fight to the last to protect the jobs of its members. Members of the metal workers' unions met at the site this morning and voted not to cross the Trades Hall-sanctioned picket line. The Industrial Relation Commission hearing was postponed to be heard in Newcastle on Wednesday morning.
For first grade coach Les Butler and Maitland League secretary Ian O'Brien, these pictures are worth 1,000 angry words. In April, Tinambit under-18s were playing Katara at Tinambit Park. Tinambit on the left-hand side of the screen was penalised. One player back-chatted the ref and that's where the trouble began. A confrontation followed and the player was allegedly manhandled by the referee. But at a tribunal hearing, the Newcastle Rugby League said there was no case for disciplinary action. The league said referee Wilson had feared he was going to be assaulted and acted purely in self-defence. Ian O'Brien believes the referee should have been suspended and says the NRL has squashed any action. For that remark, he's been disqualified indefinitely till he apologises to the league.
And I'll certainly fight it right to the end, no matter at what cost to myself.
As Maitland's first grade coach and development officer Les Butler also spoke out, calling the decision a joke. He was fined $250 and was told not to comment to the media.
No one gags me. I mean, they should know that better than anybody.
The NRL says any further debate should go through the correct channels of a tribunal hearing. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The company's workshop had a new look today to mark a decade of work in training apprentices. Hunter Valley Training was set up in 1981 to give youth a chance in trades such as boiler making, fitting and machining and electrical work. From 1983 to 1985, the group refurbished the famous locomotive 3801. Where would the community be without this training company?
There would have been 3,500 less tradesmen and tradeswomen in Australia if Hunter Valley Training Company had not been commenced.
Two of the company's brightest stars, Simon Lally and Toby Whittle, were selected by engineering giant GEC Alstom for a study tour of plants in Europe and the UK. It wouldn't be a birthday without a cake and party photo. And of course the perfect present, a miniature version of that famous train.
Fuel wall suits are reduced by 100.
I'll keep on going, I'll number it from that end.
Newcastle Council rates Blackbutt as one of the area's top tourist attractions. 125,000 people visit the reserve each year, but a report by the Zoological Parks Board said it's below set standards for animal exhibitions. Last night, this management plan was put to Council, a $2.3 million scheme to update animal enclosures and viewing areas. The only new addition to the park is a nocturnal house. Keith Swan from Newcastle Council says if Council accepts the plan, work could start next year, with the program hopefully finished within 3 years.
The Central Coast already has a biomedical waste incinerator. This unit is able to handle about 40% of the contaminated bandages, dressings and syringes discarded by the Gosford Hospital, but it's now considered too old and too small.
We will have an extra 220 beds this time next year, and we're looking for an incinerator that will burn 100% of all our wastes for the next 10 years.
With space running out on the grounds of Gosford Hospital, the Central Coast Area Health Service now wants to build another incinerator on this site in West Gosford. If approved, it will have 5 times the capacity of the old model and be able to destroy all the waste produced by the region's 5 hospitals. Health administrators say there is no health risk and point out that the current incinerator has operated for more than 8 years in the heart of the hospital complex with no ill effects.
There is no need for alarm. This incinerator will meet standards that are very high, and those standards have been determined by the State Pollution Control Commission, and they are standards which will have no impact on the environment and nor upon human health.
But the chosen site is just 1 kilometre away from the Gosford Christian Community School, where concerned teachers and parents have started circulating petitions.
The issue is, of course, no research has been done to establish whether it does have any harmful effects or not. And so the preference would be that to locate it away from a residential area, away from schools area. I've got no hassle with it having to be burnt, but why burn it in a residential area?
The Health Service will meet with concerned residents early next week in a bid to dispel their fears. If the proposal isn't approved, the Area Health Service will face an annual cost of about $200,000 to transport the waste to a privately operated incinerator in Sydney. Administrators say if that happens, community services such as baby health clinics could suffer. Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
That sound is modern technology's equivalent of a cry for help. The Lifesaver rescue helicopter is homing in on a distress beacon signal somewhere in the Upper Hunter. The beacon was set off early this morning as a test of the helicopter and its crew's ability to find what could have been a downed aircraft or a yacht in distress. The Lifesaver helicopter is now part of the Civil Aviation Authority's search and rescue resources, and this exercise is the only way to test its performance for a real emergency. New techniques have helped narrow down search time. A high-flying aircraft picks up the signal and then directs the helicopter into a general area, saving many hours of painstaking search patterns. The beacon was located at about midday. The Lifesaver had passed the test.
Well, what it means is that the resource being available, if some sort of incident should happen, the aircraft is capable of going out there and locating them. And with some of the sophisticated navigation equipment and homing devices we've got on board, we're now very qualified to do that.
The inclusion of the rescue helicopter in the search and rescue program also means that a fully equipped medical team can be on the scene as fast as the missing yacht or aircraft is found, which gives victims an even better chance of survival.
The workshop floor of the Belmont College seems a far cry from the dockside at Rhode Island and the glamour that goes with 12-metre yacht racing. But these youths are doing their bit toward Australia's challenge for the Cup in San Diego next year. A syndicate from the Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron has been building the boat and contracted the college to design a shipping cradle. Built to the same dimensions as a cargo container, it will support the valuable yacht during its shipboard voyage to America and act as a hard stand between races. According to their teacher, the apprentices have learnt valuable skills working on a real job.
And this is one of the largest jobs I've had in this metal fabrication shop, and the skills that they've learned will serve them very well in respect to their gaining apprenticeships in the boiler making trade in the Newcastle area.
The students' pride in their workmanship could only be topped by seeing an Australian boat win the coveted old mug.
Yeah, we'll be proud, it'll be great.
The workshop has turned out a few vessels of its own, such as this one, named after the teacher. So, Mr. Civil, do you have any America's Cup ambitions of your own?
Well, this could be a secret weapon for me and Murray.
Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
The 9th day of the striking painters and dockers picketing outside the Four Jacques floating dock, and still no breakthrough, except with the weather. Despite the rain, the picketers remained defiant, stopping a Navy truck loaded with supplies for the dock-bound HMAS Tobruk. The strikers said they had the support of other unions. Four Jacques management said that wasn't so.
We have checked with the TWU as well as the Trades and Labour Council, and both people indicated, or both organisations indicated, they did not sanction what was happening this morning.
The Navy trucks were allowed through just as the painters and dockers met to consider ending their strike over a work roster system rejected by Four Jacques. The union's Newcastle secretary Sam Milne went into more talks with dockyard owner Stephen Four Jacques. Why are you going to the dockyard, sir?
To present him with a proposal.
And then into yet another meeting with his members before briefly explaining what had been going on behind closed doors for almost 4 hours.
This is the only statement that I'm making. The union has put a proposal to Four Jacques to accept all members on strike, ordered by the Commissioner to resume work immediately. They've rejected it. The union has now sought the intervention of the ACTU, and a meeting of all parties will be convened as soon as possible by the ACTU early next week.
Picket remains?
The picket remains.
As he drove through the picket line outside his gates, Mr Four Jacques said he was confident the ACTU would back the company at Monday's meeting.
ACTU will come up some sort of resolution, we hope, anyway, try to put the men back to work.
Just as Mr Four Jacques was driving out, the national organiser of the Metal Workers Union, Patrick Johnston, was driving in. He'd been attending a disputes committee at Newcastle Trades Hall, which had decided to withdraw support for the picket line.
The picket is now counterproductive and it's not doing anything to help resolve the dispute. As a matter of fact, the maintaining of the picket is only going to escalate the dispute.
Mr Four Jacques said the yard's future hung in the balance as the Navy considered what to do with the Tobruk.
Well, I don't think we can hold that very long because the Navy been tell us that if we're not moving by Monday, they will.
But the metal workers organiser said he won't let Four Jacques fall.
Circumstances will this union allow this dockyard to close through industrial action.
Does that go so far as to say that metal workers would take on painters and dockers' work?
You'll have to work that out for yourself, but the trade union movement will support any action we take to save this dockyard.
The Painters and Dockers National Secretary Bob Galligan refused to comment on his picket line losing the support of other unions. But when asked what he thought of the metal workers possibly doing the work of his union of Four Jacques, he replied, "They'll never do the Painters and Dockers' work." Scott Bevan, NBN News.
South opened the scoring when Robert Rouse opened up the Toronto defence with consummate ease, and looming up in support was flanker Craig Campbell, and he did the rest for the first try of the day. Toronto's opening try was a soft affair as McKelvey just went the short side and his winger Brett Ryder accepted the pass, swivelled, dived over and scored, and the scores were level. Back again came the Scorpions from inside their own 22. Danny McKelvey danced through some wafer-thin defence and careered away towards the line. From the clouds came fullback John Medlin, and he had too much toe for the South Chasers, and Toronto were in command. To cap off a great afternoon for the Scorpions, Butler made a blue, and livewire prop Paul Rees swooped on the loose ball, and acting more like a back than a front rower, scampered over to put the issue beyond doubt.